everyone, and welcome to Caffeinate and Advocate, the show where we sip coffee and talk all things mental health. Today we're sipping tea from the Skirted Soldier, and I have to admit, it tastes like cake in a cup. I am joined today by Christine Butterbaugh, who is a regional director and director of CRS programs at Peerstar. I had to think about that, and it's where I work. That's kind of strange. Also joined by Jamie Bush, who you may recognize from our very first episode of Caffeinate and Advocate, and who is actually the mastermind of our Caffeinate and Advocate kind of video series. So Jamie and Christine are joining us today to talk about something that we have mentioned almost on every single one of our Caffeinate and Advocates, but have never talked about. And that is peer and recovery support services. We all work for Peerstar, which is a provider of peer support and recovery support services in Pennsylvania. So Christine, I'm going to start with you, and then don't worry, Jamie, I'm coming to you next. But Christine, a lot of people have never even heard of peer support. I know I didn't hear about it until I started working within it a little over 10 years ago. So, when people ask you what peer support is, how do you describe it to them?
Well, I think I hear people describe peer support in a lot of different ways. It's like a paid friend. It's almost like a sponsor. But it's really about that lived experience. Somebody, works with our peers who have that lived experience with mental health or substance use, and they're in a good place in their recovery, and, they use their journey of recovery to help other people with their journey.
So you use the word lived experience. Let's talk about peer support. What does it mean that someone is using their lived experience in peer support? I'm going to go to Jamie on this one.
I think that when you're living, or you're working in your lived experience in peer support, you're really just guiding those steps. You're bridging those gaps from where they want to be beginning their recovery. They're walking that path to recovery, as in just telling them you've been there too, or you've lived similar experiences to them. Because as we know, you're not going to always find step for step exactly what someone's done and what you're doing. And I think that you're able to provide to them the resources and the community outreach and the things that you used in order to start maintaining your own mental health recovery and finding that pathway to lead you to where you're at in your life. But letting them kind of take the ropes and then just, again, supporting their choices and their resources and things like that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when we talk about lived experience, we always think about we're referring to their mental health experience. But, people's experiences have a lot of different ranges, like being homeless or, being separated from your family members or losing custody of a child, and so our staff relate to people in all different ways, not just with their mental health.
I agree with that. Yeah. And I think that sometimes it's even that small focus of just having somebody there that understands that the journey's hard.
There's a range of things that peer specialists work on, but what do you think are some of the common goals that peer specialists support people working towards?
I think a big one. Yeah, I think a big one is we get a lot of referrals from people being discharged from the hospital. And so creating those plans so that they, reduce the likelihood they're going to have to go back to the hospital. And if they do, they don't have to spend as much time there as they did in the past. I think that's a big one.
Jamie, you're out in the field,
yes.
Really working with individuals and supporting them. And, there are unique needs of each individual. And I think peer support is so unique because it doesn't happen in an office. It doesn't happen in a conference room. It happens in the home and community. Do you have any examples of either the goals or activities that you have really enjoyed working on in the home and community environment?
I think a lot of, I've run into a lot of similar situations where, like you said, you get that ground base of just trying to find those supports or trying to start kicking them off into a proper pathway. But I always run into people really don't understand, they're coming from places where they've never been taught budgeting or they've never been taught how to properly run a routine or why it's important to focus on your overall wellness or your overall mental health versus just little pieces of it.
I think, Jamie and I were together on the very first episode of Caffeinate and Advocate, and we talked about stigma. And one of the amazing parts about peer support is that you can meet with someone stigma-free. So do you have any, when people talk about, the uniqueness of peer support and how it breaks the stigma, how do you guys kind of view that or see that? I'm not sure if my question makes sense.
No, it does. I'll take this one for a second. I think for stigma, like I work also in the forensic side now. So like, I mean, that's been short-lived, but like it's
What's
showing
the forensic
these,
side, just for anyone
So-
who's never heard of that?
currently I'm working on prep programs to, for reentry for people inside the prison system.
Okay.
So, coming from that angle, coming from the recovery angle and the peer support angle, I think the biggest stigma is they feel like they are not worthy enough. And I think that's where it breaks the stigma from peer support is we are actually looking at you as a person, not as another piece of paper or somebody that we're just trying to push through a program.
I've always said, I've described peer support as a breath of fresh air. And I think that right there is the reason it's a breath of fresh air, is that you are just surrounded by people who believe in second chances, third chances, fourth chances.
Yeah, and I think like sometimes people almost like stigmatize themselves because of so many people around them, you know, not believing them and thinking that they can do it. And so peer support then comes in as like, wait a minute, you know, I was like in a very similar place as you are. You know, you are just as likely to recover as I was, you know?
Yeah. This is where I would normally say it's coffee can question time, but I forgot my coffee can questions at our last location. So I'm going to have to do some arts and crafts and create a new coffee can for the next Caffeinate Advocate. So before we do leave though, I want to just kind of touch upon CRS. We said that Christine is the director of Peerstar's CRS program, and Jamie is actually a certified CRS. What is CRS? I keep saying those initials, but what in the world does it stand for?
Well, it stands for Certified Recovery Support. It is very similar to peer support because it is a peer-to-peer program. With CPS services, though, the focus is more on mental health, and with CRS services, the focus is more on substance use. I think the goals, you know, can be a little bit different too. You know, a lot of them are the same because, I mean, we've always worked with people with co-occurring substance use and mental health disorders, but I think we focus more on like relationship building because a lot of people, when they're using substances, they damage the relationship.
Jamie, you know, as we mentioned, you're really out in the field. Do you see a difference of different types of goals?
I think so. I think that plenty of times in like the CPS side of things, a lot of times they do already have found housing. They do have kind of a foundation. And I think when you come into the CRS side, like, or even in the forensic side, you realize that foundation is broken and you realize that you're really building from the ground up. That sometimes like even just obtaining a pair of shoes for somebody on the CRS side is like a feat. And I think that that's where the biggest difference that I've noticed.
Well, and actually some of the research that they have with the CRS program is that, you know, we are most beneficial when we're intervening actually before people go to treatment, because that's one of the things that, you know, we're pretty good at is helping people connect to treatment services, as like Jamie said, opposed to people already being involved in those types of things.
Yes.
But I want to thank you both for coming and talking about these awesome programs. It is something that if anyone's interested in peer support services, obviously we are from Peerstar. You can visit Peerstar's website, www.peerstarllc.com. If you'd like more information on our peer support or recovery support services or our forensic support, there's a plethora of things that we can support individuals in. Anything either of you would say to finish us up today?
I would just say that if you're seeking any kind of mental health services or recovery support services, that you should see if there's an option for peer support to be, you know, along for that journey.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people I talked to that said, man, I wish I would have known about peer support when I was struggling.
Well, you guys are obligated to cheers with your skirted soldier tea. So till next time, Caffeinate and Advocate.